So let's talk a little bit about the new functionality that we are going to introduce in the provisioning engine, which is the support for provisioning teams with the PnP provisioning engine. First of all, what are the options that we are going to provide? You can provision a new team still using a JSON template, so the one that you can use with Graph directly. And we think this is, or this can be useful whenever you already have a JSON template of a team that you want to provision in a unique context, in a unique solution using the provisioning engine. Moreover, if you prefer to define the whole provisioning template as an XML file, we added to the 2019-03 schema of PnP the functionality, the capability to define all of the settings and assets that you want to provision for a new team, including channels, tabs, custom apps, and stuff like that. You can clone an already existing team, creating a new one cloned from the existing one. Actually, this functionality is still under development, but is one of the easiest one, let me say, compared with the others at least. And you can teamify, I don't know if I can use this word or not, but you can teamify an already existing Office 365 group, so that if you have a group and you want to upgrade, let me say upgrade it to a team, you can use the provisioning engine, and of course you will be able to use some custom tokens to identify the already existing group and to upgrade that one into a team. What do we provision right now? We provision the whole team plus the channels, so you can create custom channels while provisioning the team, and custom tabs inside every channel. We have a quite open model, so right now we support all the predefined Teams app ID that you can use to create a custom team tab, and the same will be in the future if there will be any new team app ID available. You can even upload messages in a channel if you want, so that if you need to create, for example, a team with a channel and you want to provide a welcome message to the users or any preloaded messages, whether because you want to create a demo environment for your users or because you want to prepare a welcome message for them, you can do that using the provisioning engine. And you will be able, right now, this one is the other component that is still under development. You can add custom apps to the catalog of teams and make them available in a tab, in a channel of a team. So quite a rich set of functionalities. As Vesa said, yes, we have the JSON template available and the Graph API to create a team based on a JSON template. Why would someone want to have the same functionality through the PnP provisioning engine? Well, because using the provisioning engine, you can provision not only a team, but a whole set of assets and resources. So you can create one or more set collection in SharePoint Online within a unique hub site, for example. And you can, at the same time, within the same provisioning context, create a team and maybe show the content or some of the content coming out from those SharePoint Online sites into any of the team tabs that you have in the team that you are going to provision. So it will give you a more complete provisioning experience in the whole set of Microsoft 365 services, rather than having a provisioning engine which mainly targets SharePoint only resources, which is what we have right now, and which we'll have until almost next week when we will release the new May release of the engine. So I can switch on the next slide by myself, if you don't mind, Vesa, just to not ask you to be too much my lovely assistant. And how can you use these functionalities? Well, of course, as you can do nowadays with the other functionalities of the provisioning engine. So you can use .NET Framework and the PnP Site Core library. And in order to do that, you will need to adhere to some special requirements and use some new types that we introduced for the sake of having support for open authorization access tokens in doing the provisioning of a team. Or you can use PowerShell. And as Erwin told us a few minutes ago, there are some changes that happened under the cover of the authentication of PnP PowerShell PowerShell, again, for the sake of supporting not only the SharePoint authentication, but also the Azure Active Directory open authorization model in order to be able to use the Microsoft Graph. Because, of course, under the cover, the provisioning of Teams leverages the Microsoft Graph and most of the beta actions that are now available in the beta endpoint of the Microsoft Graph. So keep it in mind. We are still using some of the beta actions available in Graph. So let me share my screen. Let me switch to the demo environment so that we can see in practice what you can do right now with these functionalities. And please let me know when you will see my screen. So it should be loading pretty soon. Still loading.
Loading 3 dots.
Can you see it now?
No, I will tell you when we get it. So trust me, Paolo.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Now we got it. All good?
Wonderful. So this is the web UI of Microsoft Teams. And this is a demo tenant that we use in PnP. And right now we have just a couple of sample teams in this solution. Let's say that I want to provision some more teams in my environment. Here I have a PnP provisioning template, which is based on the 2019-03 schema, so the new and latest one, which will become the default one with the May release of the engine. And here in the new schema, we have a Teams section, a Teams element, which is a new one. And through this Teams element, we can define a set, so 1 or more or 0 or more team template elements. This team template element represents a section which defines a team that will be created based on a JSON template. I know it's a bit of funny and weird to see some JSON instead of the XML or the other way around, but every now and then we need to do that. So here we have an XML element which defines that we want to create a team with some specific display name, description, and visibility, and based on a JSON template, which will be basically provided to the Microsoft Graph to create such a team. As you can see here, we have a display name as well as we have one here, and this one in the attributes of the XML will override what we eventually have in the JSON template, just to let you know. So right now, for my happiness, XML wins on JSON. Just a joke, okay? So from a team perspective, we also have the team element, which is the one which allows us to define fully through XML what is the configuration, what are the settings, and the parameters for creating a new team from scratch. And here again, we can provide the display name, the description, visibility, and whatever else. We can even archive an already existing team because we are going to support delta changes on these properties. So step by step, but we will be able to apply multiple times a provisioning template. And as we do with the SharePoint Online site, we will do with the team, and we will update and do the delta changes of the settings of any already existing team. We can provision settings for the fund settings, the guest, member, and messaging settings, as you can see. And we have all of the options that usually you find available in the UI of Teams when you go under the Manage Team section and you select Settings. All these items, which you will find here, will be available and are available in the XML as well. You can configure the security section through which you can define the owners and the members. And if you want, you can even clear all the existing ones and create new ones if you need it. You can define channels. And for every single channel, aside from the name and the description, you can define tabs. Every tab will have a name, a display name, a Teams app ID, which will define what will be the content of the tab. And for every single kind of Teams app ID, you will be able to configure all of the settings which are represented by those 4 attributes that you have: the entity ID, the content URL, website URL, and remove URL. Not all of them are mandatory. It depends on what you are provisioning, but in order to know what you can provide here, you need to use as a reference the graph documentation where you can find all of this information. And just to give you a pointer, if you go to graph.microsoft.com, under API reference, you select the beta endpoint. You go to the teamwork section. Under under apps, you have the add tab section, and there at the very end you have the configure built-in tab types. And in this page you can find all of the Teams app IDs that you can use and all the settings that every single kind of Team app ID wants to have in order to be properly configured. So that said, let me try to apply this provisioning template onto a target. I will first of all execute the application and later on explain you a little bit how it works without too many details. So let me run this application, Ctrl F5. Okay, here is the application. It is a console application, and first of all, I will have to authenticate providing my work or school account credentials. So I will target this tenant, and I will use this set of credentials. Let me type my password and sign in. Oops, and of course, I need to write the right password. Okay, I'm in. If I go back to my web browser and I show you Teams, as you can see, the first team is popping up and the second one too. And pretty soon we will see also the channels popping up in the UI. And all of them will be configured accordingly to the settings that we have in the XML template. It's a matter of waiting a few seconds because it takes a while to do the whole provisioning, mainly because we have to wait for all of the resources to be ready Office 365 side, because whenever we create a team, we have to create a group, the team, the resources in Azure Active Directory, in Exchange Online, and SharePoint Online, so it takes a while. But right now, our console application is completely done, and we can close it. And here we have the team that we created using the JSON template, which is the first one, and the other one that I created using the XML syntax. And if I go to the channel that I just provisioned, you can see the welcome messages that I have in my XML template, as well as you can see that I have a few tabs, like a Bing tabs, a document library, which will show me the content of a document library that I have in SharePoint Online, and a wiki page. So pretty useful and easy. In order to do that, from a code-based perspective, you have to create an object called PnP Provisioning Context, which is a new one. This object will be the one taking care of open authorization. So internally, we will simply use, for example, MSAL, ADIL, or whatever else technology you like in order to being able to get an access token for the micrograph. Once you create this object within a using context, you can simply do the provisioning as we are used to doing using the provisioning engine. So you get a reference to the tenant, or you get a reference to a specific web, and you do apply provisioning. In this scenario of a team, you have to target a tenant because Teams is something which is at the same level of SharePoint Online and of a site collection of SharePoint Online. So you don't have to target a specific site, but you have to target the whole tenant that you have in Office 365. You use the apply provisioning hierarchy method, and you provide an object which is the in-memory representation of the XML template that we have in this file. Of course, not everybody is a developer, even if most of us most likely are developers. And regardless we are or we are not developers, usually being able to use PowerShell rather than always low-level code is something which is really good. So let me go back to my Teams environment and let me clean up what I just created. And let me do the provisioning one more time, but using PowerShell in this second demo. So here I am, I'm in PowerShell using the dev branch of PowerShell, as well as I am using the dev branch of PnP Sitecore right now, because this code is not yet released, just to be 100% clear. So I can connect to my Office Dev PnP environment, and I can even do that. So I have them side by side. Once I am connected, and I can simply apply a PnP Tenant Template, providing the same XML file as before, which is coming from the same folder as before. And by doing that, you will see that in a matter of few seconds, again, I will have my teams created in my Microsoft Team tenant. And here we are with the very first one, and pretty soon with the other one. And here it is. And again, under the cover of the PowerShell commandlet, we use exactly the same logic that I was using in my .NET sample application. I think that's it from a functionality perspective. I simply want to say also thank you to Laura Cochrane, who helped me developing the Teams object handler for the creation of teams based on a JSON template, and the whole community, generally speaking, because every single time we have a new functionality, it's because of the community and not just because of every single person contributed, but the whole community altogether. So I think that's it, Besa. If there are any questions in the chat, I don't know because I didn't follow them.
There's a few questions on the chat. Irvin has been answering, I think, majority of them, more related on permissions required on a different scenarios. If we want to elaborate those permissions, we would have time for that one as well. The permissions are slightly, how would I put it? They don't always require, if you're using PnP PowerShell, you don't have to be a tenant administrator always, but in this case, you need it to be. In your code, at least, we were doing operations in a tenant level, weren't we?
Yeah, the permission from a graph perspective, because under the cover we're using graph, are the group read-write all permission, as well as to get the users, we need also read user all, if I'm not wrong with the name of the permission. But yeah. Basically, you need to being able to read and write groups because it's a requirement to being able to create teams, and you need to be able to read the inventory of users to being able to add members or owners that you need to read first and then add as owners or members of the group. Yeah. That's it. So from this perspective, those are the only two permissions that we need from a Azure AD perspective. In the future, when there will be much more capabilities, maybe we will need more permissions.
Yep, absolutely. And really the key power here, maybe once again, just recapping on Simon's question as well, but was this a template? Yes, this was a tenant template, which now is supporting, starting from May, is supporting JSON definitions for teams or XML definitions for teams. So you're able to then combine these settings to SharePoint site collection provisioning and all of the other provisioning elements, and then you can stamp, in quotes, you can always expect to get exactly the same end result when you're applying a template. The template itself can be a PnP template file or an XML file. In this case, it was an XML in XML format, but it could be also a PnP file, which inside of the PnP file contains an XML and assets like branding elements, and then you're able to apply those things to any tenant and get exactly the same end result. We're looking into extending the capabilities of the tenant templates as much as possible, depending obviously on the API surface, whatever the applications are offering. So right now, as an example, Flow and Power Apps are still having quite limited administrative APIs, so we can't really move to that direction yet, but we're looking into kind of combining everything into this tenant template thinking. So you're able to define your tenant scope solutions built with SharePoint, Teams, Power Apps, Flow, and whatever elements using a one file, and then apply that to a tenant, and you will get exactly the same end result. So really cool.
And just to make an example, maybe in the near future we will also have something new from a list of templates available on the provisioning service, which will provision not only sites but also teams. Why not? I mean, correct. Once we have the functionality, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. So right now, the provisioning service, which I showed in the first demo, is mainly targeted for SharePoint lookbook sites, and then there's the custom learning scenario, but we'll extend those templates in the future as well. So really, really cool stuff. Good. There is a question. We're using your screen, Paolo. Let me actually go on the. Well, actually, let's use your screen if needed.
Oops, too late.
No, okay, fine. Let's go to the slides. So let me actually get the slides back on. No worries. Patrick is asking related on, given this is API, then implementation is language agnostic. Well, the JSON API for Teams creation is a graph API, and yes, that's a language agnostic. But if you're using PnP PowerShell, if you're using the engine, those are still unfortunately limited on .NET or the .NET or the PowerShell. Now, and the reason for that one is that we're missing the .NET Core support yet on a native season, which is, by the way, still planned to get, well, we're working on it, and in the best case scenario, we might have some announcements coming up in upcoming conferences. We haven't confirmed that scenario yet, and we're not going to take anything away from that announcement before it actually happens. But the CSAM core support is needed for .NET Core support for the PowerShell and .NET Core support for the engine itself.
And I'm just wondering if the question was more about programming languages or languages like English, Italian, Finnish, and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, we do support tokens in the XML, so you can have whatever you want and resource strings and whatever else. If the question was more about languages from a UI culture perspective, I don't know.
Yeah. Sunny J is asking, can we associate content type to Teams channel document library using this template? Yes, because now what actually happens there, just to clarify, so the document library which you see in Teams is actually a SharePoint site document library. So there is a SharePoint site behind of the scenes, and technically you can associate a content type on the document library behind of the Teams channel. Now, should you do that? And for example, to require metadata and all of that, that's debatable. That's the separate discussion. Technically, yes. So that is absolutely doable.